to the Northern Regional Advisory Council meeting on September 2nd, 2020. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the ability of the virus to spread from person to person, the governor has implemented a number of executive orders directed at controlling the spread of the virus by minimizing face-to-face interactions. Public gatherings are strongly discouraged by the CDC, the state of Utah, and local health departments, since they facilitate face-to-face contact and pose an elevated risk for virus transmission. The Division of Wildlife Resources and the chair of this public body have determined that the public gathering at Regional Advisory Council and Wildlife Board meeting presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who attend, and will conduct this meeting using a fully electronic format. This meeting format is authorized by recent amendment to the Utah Code and executive order by Utah Governor Gary Herbert, and will be temporarily used in place of in-person public meetings that usually occur around the state. Anyone wishing to comment on agenda topics in future meetings or to observe this meeting may do so by logging onto the division's webpage. I'll start today's meeting by conducting a roll call. Before I start the roll call, let the record reflect that RAC members Matt Clark, Junior Goring, David Earl, and Mike Lauder have all been asked to be excused from tonight's meeting. So with that, we'll begin with the roll call, and I'd start with Ryan Brown.
Here.
Paul Chase.
Here.
David Earl is excused. Christopher Hoekstrom.
Here.
Randy Hutchinson.
Here.
Emily Jensko.
Here.
Aaron Johnson.
Here.
Mike Lauder is excused. Kevin McLeod.
Here.
Darren Perry.
Here.
Kristen Purdy.
Here.
And Casey Snyder.
Here.
All right. Having seen that, we have a quorum, and so thank everyone for attending tonight. I want to also recognize that we're joined by a number of DWR personnel who are participating live, as well as various DWR Northern personnel. Finally, and most importantly, I'd like to welcome the public who are tuning in this evening by watching the live broadcast online. In preparation for this meeting, the DWR posted each of tonight's presentations online, and the public was able to view those presentations and submit their written comments for each of those items for 10 days. Due to the sheer volume of comments we received, we will not be able to read those comments into the record. We will do our best to summarize those public comments for you this evening, and all of those comments have been sent to the RAC members in their entirety for their review and consideration. We won't be able to accommodate additional public comment during tonight's meeting, but RAC members are welcome to address the specific concerns they received from public or outlined in the written comments that we all received. We'll all adhere to the following format for each of tonight's agenda items. I'll announce the agenda item, and we will not listen to the presentation by the DWR personnel tonight. All RAC members have been asked to view the recorded presentations online prior to this meeting. The regional supervisor will then summarize the public comments received for the agenda item. I'll then call for questions from RAC members on that agenda item. After questions, I will ask RAC members, or after that, I will call, let me get to the right spot as I was reading. More information can be requested, by RAC members. They can receive information from the UDWR staff. Ben Nadowski, the Northern Regional Supervisor, will help me keep track of your input and concerns. We'll be sure to revisit each of each of them for discussion and actions. And we will repeat this process until we have addressed everyone's feedback. We will repeat the process for each of tonight's agenda items. I'll ask RAC members to please respect one another's opinions and opportunities to speak this evening. If any of you wish to speak at once, please be patient while we call on you one at a time. Please also be sure to clearly communicate your questions or concerns so that we can work through tonight's meeting efficiently, effectively, and respectfully. Let's get started by reviewing and approving tonight's agenda and minutes from our July 29th, 2020 meeting. Does anyone have any questions or concerns regarding the agenda or minutes from last month? Not hearing any. I'd entertain a motion that we approve those minutes from last month.
Justin, I'd propose that we approve those minutes. This is Randy.
Thank you, Randy.
I'll second that proposal. This is
We
Ryan.
have a motion by Randy and a second by Ryan. All right, let's go ahead and take a vote at this time on that. Ryan Brown,
In favor.
Paul Chase,
Yes.
Christopher Hogstrom,
Yes.
Randy Hutchinson,
Yes.
Emily Jensko,
Yes.
Aaron Johnson,
Yes.
Kevin McLeod,
Yes.
Darren Perry,
Yes.
Kristen Purdy,
Yes.
and Casey Snyder.
Yes.
All right. The approval of the minutes from last month passes unanimously. We'll go on. As everyone had an opportunity to look at the agenda for today's meeting, is there any questions or comments about today's agenda? If not, I'll entertain a motion to accept today's agenda or tonight's meeting's agenda.
I'll move to approve the agenda also.
Thank you, Randy. We have a motion to approve the agenda by Randy. We have a second.
I'll second.
That was also by Kevin, a second. I think we'll need to go through the roll call once again. So we'll go ahead and start. So approval to accept tonight's agenda. We'll take a vote right now, and we'll start with Ryan Brown,
Yes.
Paul Chase,
Yes.
Christopher Hogstrom,
Yes.
Randy Hutchinson,
Yes.
Emily Jensko,
Yes.
Aaron Johnson,
Yes.
Kevin McLeod,
Yes.
Darren Perry,
Yes.
Kristen Purdy,
Yes.
Casey Snyder.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much. With that, we'll go ahead and move to our next agenda item, and this will be an update on what took place at last month's Wildlife Board meeting. And I did attend. There's a few things I've spoken with Ben, and I feel like he can probably do it the best justice to be able to explain how and give us an update on what took place in the Wildlife Board meeting last month. So I'll turn some time over to Ben to do that. Once he's done that, I'll then ask him if he will go ahead and give us our regional update as well.
Right. Thanks, Mr. Chair. So after approving the agenda and the minutes for the meeting, they moved into the fur bear and bobcat harvest recommendations for 2020 and 2021. Like us, they didn't have a ton of discussion or concerns, in that motion to approve the division's recommendations passed unanimously. After that, the board moved into the Cougar recommendations and rule amendments. A motion was made and passed with a 5-1 vote with Brett Selman opposed. The motion was that we extend the limited entry season dates by 30 days on the Oker Stansbury, East and Wasatch Mountains, West Strawberry units. Again, that motion passed 5-1. Another motion was made that the board accept the remainder of the Cougar recommendations as presented by the division. After some discussion, that motion was then amended to include some language to change the definition of kitten in our guidebook. So rather than counting on a age less than 1 year old, the board recommended that we use body markings, so spotting and leg barring instead of an age. And that motion, as well as the original motion, passed unanimously. There were also some items on the board's agenda that were not on the RAC agendas. Some of these items, as per rule, are go straight to the board and don't go through the RACs, including the proposed sensitive species list that the division recommends for the state of Utah. And that discussion was tabled through a motion to table the recommendations until the October 1st Wildlife Board meeting and to schedule an educational work session in the meantime. So the board scheduled a work session for September 16th, and I think they landed on 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. That motion passed unanimously. After that, there were a number of Expo permit agenda items, including an Expo permit audit, and as well as a Expo contract extension and Expo permit list. Those agenda items moved rather quickly, and the Expo permit audit was accepted and passed unanimously. The contract extension was passed unanimously as well. And the Expo permit allocation passed unanimously, with an addition that that all 200 permits that are allocated for the Expo permit are available to both residents and non-residents. So in the past, I understand there were five once-in-a-lifetime permits that were allocated specifically to non-residents. The board made that change for the duration of the new contract to make all 200 permits available to residents and non-residents alike. There were also some Expo permit rule amendments that passed unanimously as presented by the division. And there was some discussion about additional board actions and business items. And board member Albrecht made a motion to ask the division to look at any new hunting technology since the last update to the board and then report on it. And then to place it on the action log. That was seconded by Randy Dirth, and that passed unanimously as well. And after all of that, they motion to adjourn.
All right, thank you very much, Matt. Yeah, I was just going to ask, does anyone have any questions for Ben?
Yeah, Ben, what was the contract extension for the Expo?
It was to extend the contract from 5 to 10 years.
Okay, thank you.
So Randy, and correct me if I misspeak on this, but when they awarded the contract the last time, there's a clause that, so it's a 5-year contract, but was there not the thing that also said after the audit, if everything appears correct, and that organization could extend it another 5 years, assuming that they complied with everything. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you for throwing that in, Justin. I did not remember or recall that.
All right. Is there any other questions? The only thing I would say is also, I just, as I represented our Northern RAC there, I did my best to try to convey the feeling, as far as concerning collared lions, and talked a little bit about that there. But I feel like they didn't feel like there was a major concern there with it, and so there wasn't a lot of conversation. But I did make sure I conveyed that was one of the concerns that we had, is to make sure that we tried to protect them the best that we could. All right. There's no other questions or comments. We'll go ahead and hear a regional update from Ben at this time.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Chair. So it's been busy, of course. Everybody's busy these days, but our wildlife section's been working on some of the reviewing the herd population objectives as directed by the board recently. And they are looking at the Box Elder, Cache, Ogden, and the Morgan South Ridge units. That's 1, 2, 3, and 4. We'll be they're convening some committees and discussing those objectives, and we'll come back with some new recommendations or numbers. But just want to let you guys know that that's underway. They're really busy with CWMU apps and renewals. As you know, we've got a lot of CWMUs in the northern region, so that always takes up a lot of time for our wildlife staff, and this year's a particularly heavy year given the cycle. They've also been busy with elk and pronghorn classifications. They also did an aerial survey for mountain goats in the Ogden unit. That was a big effort, took a lot of regional hands to do that. Also handling a number of nuisance and depredation calls, as you could expect. Of course, they're gearing up for all the hunts, including some CWD testing. They're going to focus on the Box Elder, Cache, and Ogden units this year, both during the elk and deer any weapon hunts. And our waterfowl crew has been really busy. I haven't heard back from them in the last few hours, but I don't think there's cell coverage out in the Phragmites of the wetlands, but those guys are absolutely, they're just swamped, I guess. Bad pun. I didn't mean to have the pun there, but they're treating a ton of frag this year with chemical treatments and also livestock grazing. And I guess I just want to mention this because those guys are working their butts off. And I think for the waterfowl hunters that are going to go to that will be a field next month are going to see a big difference in the marsh. So hats off to those guys for all the hard work they're putting in. And one of these days they'll take off their masks and PPE so they can answer a cell phone outside of the wetlands. But as it is, I don't want to keep them from doing that hard work. So our administrative sections have been really busy at the front desk. I've mentioned it before that because of COVID, we've had a really skeleton crew of people that are keeping us in business every day. We've tried really hard to keep as many employees out of the office and away from them the best that we can. Those guys are all wearing masks and taking a lot of precautions throughout the day as they serve the public and make sure to provide the customer service that people are needing. And so my hat's off to those guys for sure. A lot of online sales are taking place as a result of COVID, as we discussed in our last RAC meeting. That's going to continue for the fall general season turkey permits that go on sale. Is that tomorrow? Tomorrow's the 3rd, right? So more of the online things are happening, but we're getting a ton of phone calls from people looking for support, and we got people on the horn, making sure that people get all the service that they need. They're also issuing quite a few duplicate licenses. There was some kind of a snafu where some folks aren't receiving some of the permits that they purchased in the mail. And so we are printing off those duplicate licenses free of charge. So that's been keeping us busy. But it is nice to see that the public has been respecting the social distancing and the use of masks when they come to see our staff. So our staff has felt really comforted by that. Haven't been any altercations here. Hopefully that remains. I'll knock on wood there. We've discussed, I'll move into the habitat section, but we have discussed in the past, and this is something that my colleagues here at Division are tired of hearing me talk about, but up here in the northern region and to a large degree as well in the central region, we are seeing a ton of public use out in our wildlife management areas. I see Paul Chase nodding pretty heartily. I think we're kind of all in the same boat with our federal partners and our state partners. Our public lands are seeing a ton of pressure, a ton of use. People are flocking to the outdoors and looking for space. And they're finding the social distance out in the outdoors, and that's great. But that does come with challenges for us. And we've got a really capable crew here, but I'll just say that these times have definitely stretched their ability to keep up with that kind of pressure. We're just not staffed for this much use as it is normally. And so it's been a really difficult summer for our habitat section, but it's also for our law enforcement section, because we've got so many people out there using our lands. In some cases, there are people abusing our lands and leaving behind a lot of damage and litter and trash. So that's taken a lot of time of our law enforcement officers too, to make sure that we've got people following up on all those issues. So in spite of all of that work, our habitat section still is commencing a bunch of habitat projects this fall. I keep seeing contracts come through, and I'm amazed at how many they're able to accomplish in spite of the workload that they have. They're finding ways to still get a bunch of guzzler work done all around the West Desert. Some of you might have seen the Facebook post we had from our outreach section on when they were bringing water to the bighorn sheep in the Newfies. Sorry, say that 10 times fast. Those sheep were thirsty. They were surrounding our staff while they were putting water in those guzzlers. So the work that they're doing is absolutely critical to wildlife, and I'm just appreciative that in spite of the new workloads that they're under, they're still getting a lot of that work done. We also don't have helicopters that are helping us with construction of new guzzlers. So our staff are finding ways, with the help of volunteers, thank goodness, to haul in new guzzler equipment by hand. And so that has been a huge workload as well. So hats off to those guys. Our law enforcement section, as they're stretched thin on these WMA challenges, they're enforcing a lot of things that are not our typical wildlife law enforcement, but they are certainly capable law enforcement officers that are able to handle just about anything. But in addition to the recreational use challenges, we're also seeing twice as many AIS decons and inspections this year as we did last year. So our inspection station at Bear Lake in particular has just been hopping and keeping those guys really, really busy. People have been rolling through the check station without stopping, and so our officers have to do a lot of have to pull a lot of folks over to make sure that the compliance is there. And so that has kept those guys really busy. And in spite of all of that, they still have a big case workload. I understand that some of the courts are a little bit further behind in the timing probably because of COVID as well. And so some of our cases are still waiting for the day in court, but they'll get their day as soon as they can. In our aquatic section, kokanee salmon have begun to spawn both at Causey and Porcupine reservoirs. That's an awesome viewing opportunity if anybody's interested. They're also, we'll be stocking our community fisheries with trout soon. And in concert with that, our fisheries staff has coordinated a community fisheries study where they're going to look at use and harvest of fish in these ponds. We know we get a lot of pressure, but they've got a really great study design in place. And they're going to follow that up also with a creel survey. So they'll be interviewing anglers to look at use and harvest and satisfaction, and that should help us make some recommendations for our community fisheries moving forward. So that's all I've got for my update. I think Ryan mentioned that the upland game hunt started today. Well, I think that was Ryan, but unless there's questions, that's all I got, guys.
Ben, I have a question. It may be a little bit early, but have we seen any change with the rules that changed as far as turning tags back? Have we seen a difference? I remember I was stunned and just amazed last time when I heard how many turn back tags didn't get used. Are we seeing a difference?
You know what? I think we have Lindy Varney on the call.
I was gonna say, I can take that one, Ben.
I know, I got lucked out, man. Thanks for asking. The night that Lindy's with us.
Yeah.
I think she'd be the only one that can answer it.
Okay.
Kind of. It's hard to tell this early in the game, just because the hunts are, just starting. Yeah. But there are still a lot of permits being surrendered. It's still kind of shocking to me. But wow. It's a lot of general season mostly. Wow. We're still having limited entry and once and lifetime tags turned back in. But in the, I would say maybe it's made a difference. But at end of the year, I'll definitely have a summary for all of you guys.
Perfect.
Because
Thank you.
Yeah, so I hope that kind of helped.
I'm curious. I figured we were a little early. We've only had limited entry archery tag hunts start basically, so there's not.
Yep.
Hard to tell.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Does anyone
Thanks,
else have any questions? All right. If not, we'll go ahead and move to agenda item number 5, the fishing recommendations and fishing contest rule amendments. Remind me, Ben, do we have you give an update first, or do I ask for questions first? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, then we just go through the public input real quick.
Will you go ahead and do that for us, please?
Yeah. And I know, Kristen, you asked, I think it was Kristen, if not, correct me, but someone asked last time how many respondents we had. These recommendations are far less controversial than past recommendations. So we only had 8 respondents for our region. So just keep that in mind as I read off this feedback for the evening. For this agenda item, 0% opposed the recommendations, 25% were neutral, and 75% were in support.
All right. Thank you very much, Ben. RAC, is there any RAC members that have any questions for, I believe Randy's on the call, if we have any questions for him concerning the fish recommendation and fishing contest rule amendments. All right, I might have one more. Again, just as far as the spear, I think this is right one. Yeah, as far as the spear fishing goes, is it that, how many people are doing that? Do we see that as a beginning to be more popular? Is it growing in size, or?
Yeah, I could feel that. Thanks for the question, Justin. I don't know if I have a feel if it's growing in popularity or not here in the state. I've kind of looked at the numbers. I think about 1% of our anglers are spear anglers.
So I noticed in the percentage, when it would say that there were, obviously that they were higher opposing some of those things. Do you have any, like, as far as those who responded, how many of them were there on?
In terms of the total number of respondents we got from spearfishers?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I think we had about 40 respond to our survey. So, I mean, it's not a ton, but it's also a decent sample to draw from.
All right. And the numbers made sense. Obviously, there's not a catch and release with those. And so, I thought the numbers looked pretty fair to me, and it sounded like it was overwhelming, in support of the public. Once again, any RAC members have any questions for Randy concerning this? Or any comments at all?
I have just a quick comment is all. I'm just going to applaud the efforts that are being made to try to standardize things as much as possible through the state. I think that's going to be I would expect that would be well received. So I think that's an effort well worth the time and energy.
Yeah, we appreciate that comment. I think you'll see us continue down the road to look at ways we could standardize things and simplify our regulations.
Well, if there are no more questions or comments, would anyone like to make a motion?
One more question.
Oh, go ahead, Chris.
I was just curious, one of the public comments talked about some situations where the bow hunting season was out of sync with spear fishing. And I was just curious, is that something that you guys might consider looking into for the future?
I believe I'll have to look at the comment a little bit more here. Maybe you could fill me in, Craig, if I get this wrong here, but I believe that bow fishing generally is not allowed in the state except for anglers who are targeting non-game, non-protected species. So these are primarily carp. And I don't know if we have any season on them per se. I think we've got a few water bodies where there is some seasonal closures or time closures during the day where that's permitted, but that's kind of where we stand right now on bow fishing here in the state. So what you kind of see broadly is spear fishing is allowed, but bow fishing has some restrictions again on the species that are allowed for harvest.
Yeah, you're right, Randy. That's a good synopsis.
So just to be clear, so the only, it would just be the carp is the only species that you're able to bow fish in the state of Utah?
There's a couple others on there, but it's a pretty short list. I'm not sure the whole list, but it's carp and maybe Utah chub. I mean, that's probably about it.
Okay. Okay. Once again, is there anyone that would like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to accept the proposal as presented.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Awesome. So I have a motion to accept the presentation that accepted it rule as presented by Chris Holmstrom and a second by Emily Jensko. All right. Is there any questions or about the motion? Not, we'll go ahead and take a vote. We'll begin with Ryan Brown,
Yes.
Paul Chase,
Yes.
David Earl is not here, Christopher Holmstrom,
Yes.
Randy Hutchinson,
Yes.
Emily Jensko,
Yes.
Aaron Johnson,
Yes.
Kevin McLeod,
Yes.
Darren Perry,
Yes.
Kristen Purdy,
Yes.
and Casey Snyder.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Okay, we will now, agenda item number 6 is a informational, and we have Craig Walker on the call who will talk to us about angler opportunity and assessment update. As he does this, I spoke with him earlier. I believe all RAC members received a letter from Ken Strong, who's a fishing coordinator for SFW, and he had some questions and brought some stuff to our attention. And I also asked Craig if he might give us kind of a synopsis of that letter and what they're doing and what their plans are to help with that. So if that's all right, we'll give some time over to Craig now. He is the
Sure.
Aquatics Section Assistant Chief. I should make sure, let him know his title also.
Thanks. So Justin, Ken last night presented some information, and he has sent an email out to the RACs and to the Wildlife Board on behalf of SFW in support of both the RACs and the Wildlife Board initially sending letters to Wyoming Game and Fish regarding the perceived inequity among our angling public related to the reciprocal stamp at Flaming Gorge. The letter or the emails that went out incorrectly stated that the reciprocal stamp at Wyoming costs $40 and that the reciprocal stamp price for Wyoming anglers here in Utah was nothing. It's actually $30 for a reciprocal stamp in Wyoming and $10 in Utah. The thought process was in this letter for the groups, the RACs and the Wildlife Board to all be supportive of Wyoming moving toward a regulation and reciprocity agreement that would be more analogous to Bear Lake and to Lake Powell, where one state's license would allow you to fish the entire body of water, regardless of what side of the reservoir you were on. At this point, after the Central Region RAC last night, the mindset of the Central Region RAC was to recommend that one letter be sent by the Wildlife Board to Wyoming Game and Fish and the Wyoming Commission in support of that Lake Powell or Bear Lake-like regulation and reciprocity agreement.
All right. Thank you, Craig. I know that wasn't part of the information. I just asked if he would share that because I do agree that I don't believe it's fair, if that's the right word, that we as Utahns pay and they don't. And so we were invited to to write a letter, and my opinion would be that I think it's important that it be done, but our job as a RAC, is to make recommendations to the Wildlife Board, and then they're the ones who would represent the state of Utah and all of the its citizens. And so, as I said, that they are going to address that. I think that's probably what's important. That the state of Wyoming would I imagine would respect the letter from our Wildlife Board, and that would be the best way to approach that. But I do think something needs to be done to try to make things a little more equal. As far as the other parts of his, if there's questions on that, but also if we have any questions on the information that we received watching the video prior to tonight's meeting, is there anyone that has questions about the information that Craig presented in his video, or comments?
I have just a quick comment, Justin. Craig, I know it's just under review, so I know no decisions have been made or anything like that, but I would just want to throw out there, I'm very cautious about doing any type of limited entry in fishing. I don't think it works well in the big game the way we have it set up right now. I don't know why we would want to go down that road with our fish. And I know, like I said, I know it's just a consideration, but I just wanted to get that out there.
No, thanks, Randy. I don't know that we would have thought of pursuing this on our own, but at the request of the board last year, we were given this task as an action item, and we're trying to follow up on it as best we can. And we too are making sure that we do this in a very metered manner. We don't take this lightly. It is a public resource, as was expressed in one of the comments that we received. I think that, what I described in the presentation, relying on a sister state's effort to assess whether or not this does provide any benefit that might outweigh the costs that I described in the presentation, is a first step. The second step is to ask those questions that I asked in that presentation as well. Specifically, does any benefit that we would gain from this for a few anglers outweigh the potential cost for hundreds of thousands of anglers? And you're absolutely right. This is not something we take lightly. It is why I described it as something that we will investigate over the coming years and provide an in-depth investigation of that.
What might that look like? Would that be, for instance, saying a certain section of the river was closed to public and you had to draw a permit? Is that what it's suggesting, or is that kind of what a limited entry would be, or a certain body of water would be off limit unless you were to draw that? Is that kind of what that would mean as far as a limited entry fishing area?
There's limited entry fishing areas. There's limited entry fishing opportunities for species. There's a variety of potential scenarios that you could offer up as potential limited entry experiences. I think Oregon primarily is offering up access to areas that had previously been closed for various conservation reasons. And they feel that those populations are at a point where they can afford some angling pressure, but they want to limit the access to those. Thinking of it in Utah, I can't actually think of too many opportunities that we afford anglers where we have limited access and we would then open up access more readily to them. I think the only opportunities that we have would be going the opposite way, which is having a completely open situation and restricting access. And that's, again, one of those reasons why we want to be very cautious and are approaching this, as I described it, in a very metered way, because we don't have things that we can open up more broadly. We would be restricting access.
Right. Thank you. I would, also agree with what Randy's comment. I agree with his comment as well. Is there any other questions or comments that anyone has for Craig at this time? All right. Thank you for making yourself available and for also giving us that letter. So thanks for all that you do.
Thanks for the opportunity, guys.
All right. Everyone's all right. We'll go ahead now and move to agenda item number 7, which is the Middle Provo River update. And I believe Jackie Watson is on the call. She's the Blue Ribbon Fisheries biologist. Hopefully everyone had the opportunity to watch her, her presentation. Does anyone have any questions or comments, or mostly questions, or maybe have her clarify anything on that? All right, I think we're letting you off easy. Jackie, is there anything that you would like to add or say at this time?
No, I just appreciated the opportunity to present the information. And if you come up with questions at a later date, please feel free to contact me.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so I'll ask one last time before we move to the next agenda item if there was anyone else have any other questions for her or comments. All right. Thank you, Jackie. All right. We'll go to our final agenda item number 8, which is a rule amendment. I guess it'd be R657-62 rule amendments about deployed military. And we have Lindy Varney, who is on this call also. She's the wildlife licensing coordinator. Does anyone have any questions for her as far as this rule amendment or comments?
Chair, I've got some public comment as well we can summarize.
Oh, I'm sorry. Please, yes, do that.
No problem, no
first.
problem. There were 0 of the 8 that opposed the recommendation. 25% were neutral and 75% supported. So I'm sorry, that was the, oops, I'm on the wrong one. That was the one I just read last time, sorry. Let me start over. Ignore everything I said. Of the 8, 12.5% opposed, 50% neutral, and 37.5% support.
That surprises me that there's someone in opposition against this. I like what it's doing. I think it's pretty clear as far as what the requirements are. So I don't see it being abused. And many of you know I do volunteer a lot of time helping, do some things for our veterans on forms of hunts. And just today I spoke with three different veterans who are no longer serving, but they really like the idea of what we're offering. In fact, my comment would be is I would like to see us to even do more as some of the other states, for instance, Idaho, and what they do for their veterans as far as the cost of licensing and stuff. Question I have, Lindy, is there anything, are we looked at doing anything more for our servicemen and those who serve our country?
So we're always investigating ways that we can do, because like you said, there's other states that do other things. So a couple of years ago, we cut our combination license price for our veterans and our fishing licenses and for our combos. So there is a discount in those licenses. And this is kind of our next step, is helping those servicemen and women that are out there fighting for our freedom and giving them a break because they're out there doing a service to the country. But we do have other things that we're investigating, but we're just kind of taking a slow approach to it.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions or about the rule?
Justin, I have
Yes.
a question for Lindy. Lindy, this is Chris Purdy.
Hi.
I noticed in your proposal that you define deployed as outside of the continental United States. Why did you define it as outside of the CONUS?
When we were coming up with a definition of what deployed meant, that one was used a lot in other situations outside the division itself. And so that's where we started with. That's the starting ground of defining it outside the U.S. continental US. It's kind of where we felt comfortable because they're out there outside the US in other countries fighting or serving our nation.
Okay, so let me give you some background. I'm a retired military officer, and when I deployed, I certainly could have deployed somewhere in the lower 48 states. Let me give you an example, not theoretical, this is not me, but let's say a unit from Fort Sam Houston, a medical unit has to deploy to Landstuhl Air Base, Germany, because there's a conflict in the Mideast, and the casualties are going to come through Landstuhl, so they need extra medical help. The unit at Fort Sam Houston has got to be backfilled. It's conceivable that Utah reservists would be activated to go to Fort Sam Houston and backfill, that unit that's headed to Germany. And deployed is deployed. You might be in Germany, you might be in Texas, but you are deployed and you are not hunting. And so my concern is that the terminology of the proposal is limiting. I would like to see it have a broader scope and eliminate a few words in the memorandum. And so you define the word deployed at the bottom of the memorandum, and it included the words to active duty outside the continental US and its territories on federal orders from military command. I'd like to see that definition say to active duty on federal orders from military command, because you can certainly be deployed within the CONUS and you are gone. You're not hunting in Utah, if you're deployed elsewhere. And it certainly is, you're serving still, but you're not enjoying your benefits of Utah statehood if you're deployed to Texas.
No, that's an excellent point you brought up. If the RAC chooses to make a motion to do that, that's something that we can definitely look into.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. I learned something new about you today. I was not aware of your service, so I just want to say thank you. And
oh, you did not know that I was a U.S. trained killer?
No, I did not know that.
Okay, well, I'm pleased to tell you.
I'll be walking more lightly and cautiously around
You'll
you.
be watching your step, right?
Yes.
Chair?
Yes, Kevin.
I really agree with what Kristen has said. In fact, I think any deployed military individual, any individual in the military that's deployed in any way, it should qualify. Those guys, those men and women are out there working hard for us every day, and they never know when they're going to be gone and when they're not. So I like the idea of making a motion or a recommendation to the RAC from our or to the board from our RAC to expand that to any deployed military.
All right. I'd entertain that if someone would like to, between hearing both of your comments, I'd entertain a motion that would reflect those comments this time.
I'd be happy to make the motion.
Okay.
I'd like to
please repeat it. Thank you.
Okay. I'm pulling up the memorandum on my phone so that I can hopefully cite the right words. I'd like the proposal to remain the same with the exception of the definition of deployed. And I would like the words outside the continental US and its territories to be removed from the definition.
Okay, will you repeat just to remove
the words you'd like me to read? Okay,
yeah.
Remove these words from the definition of deployed. The words are outside the continental US and its territories.
Okay.
So instead, the definition it'll be the same, and it will read Deployed means movement from a military's personnel's permanent duty station to active duty on federal orders from military command. So that encompasses a domestic deployment or an overseas deployment.
Got it. So the proposal will say to accept the rule amendments with the change of definition of deployment and to remove the words outside the continental U.S. and territory. And
Yes, sir.
territories.
That's right. Correct.
All right.
I would second that motion.
And I have a second from Kevin. Is there any discussion on the motion or questions? All right, that's all right. We'll go ahead and take a vote. I'll begin with Ryan Brown,
Yes.
Paul Chase,
Yes.
Christopher Hogstrom. You there,
Yes.
Christopher? Yes.
Yes.
Randy Hutchinson,
Yes.
Emily Jensko,
Yes.
Aaron Johnson,
Yes.
Kevin McLeod,
Yes.
Darren Perry,
Yes.
Kristen Purdy,
Yes.
and Casey Snyder.
Yes.
All right, motion passes unanimously. Just to circle back for 1 second. So as we were discussing in agenda item number 6 about the letter concerning the agreement between the state of Utah and Wyoming, does anyone feel that we need to have any motion or as far as to invite the division to look into that, or do you feel with what Craig told us that's already noted and on their agenda? Does anyone feel like that's something that we need to hold a vote on, or are we okay with that?
I'm okay with the way it stands. I think that the wildlife board will look at it.
Does anyone have any other comment or questions about that? Okay.
Justin, one thing I think I may have failed to mention, I can't remember if I stated it or not. Each RAC member that was in support of it would have the ability to be a signatory on that letter. So I don't know if that changes your need to vote or however that works.
I like that. So my understanding, once the letter has been drafted, it'll come before the RAC again. We'll have an opportunity to see it and vote if we stand in favor of that, correct?
That's how I understood it, correct.
Okay. I think we can wait until that time to vote on that. And I believe by it being brought up in the RAC meeting, it's through SFW, I believe that they've accomplished what they're trying to do as far as to get the wildlife board and the division to look into that. So with that, we have gone through all of our items on the agenda today. If there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Adjourn. AJ.
Okay, that was Aaron Johnson that made a motion to adjourn the meeting. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
And a second by Randy Hutchinson. Instead of going through the roll call, does anyone not want to end this call? If everyone's in favor, we'll go ahead and adjourn tonight's meeting. Let's say it's unanimous we'll adjourn tonight's meetings. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, you guys. Have a good night.
Ben, do you have any questions as far as, did we get everything as far as, and I guess in Jody as well, as far as I think it was pretty simple.